bit more like spring out there today. Yay, moving forward. We did start at 6 o'clock with some personnel issues. We are back in open session. There is one item that I guess I would just like some feedback from the board before we start the rest of our meeting. We generally have some board development between our closed session and our open session. We didn't have any time for that. The topic of the board development this time was on the survey of the holiday policy, which was released today. And I just was wondering if the board had any ideas about whether we should include it in the regular meeting next, or maybe in the board development next month, or...
This was the results of the staff survey, just for clarification.
Board development next month.
more board development next month.
Well, my concern with that is if we don't have enough time again, and
Yeah.
we really do need to talk about
this.
this subject.
Yeah.
So maybe the agenda would be more appropriate.
And we can make it an agenda item.
What we can do is put it in board development if time, and if not, we roll that into the agenda.
Awesome, perfect.
Awesome, so that we definitely will deal with that next month.
Why don't we
Perfect.
just make it a topic?
Mhm.
in
And that's
board
what,
development,
Yep.
So that we do have time.
Yep.
all right, thank you. Moving on, I need approval of the minutes from our February 11th meeting and also our special board meeting from February 26th.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Need approval of the agenda for this evening?
Any changes?
Anything?
Nope.
No?
No
No
changes.
changes?
Approved.
Second.
Jeff and, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Wonderful. Tonight we have an opportunity to address the board on any topic that you might like. 4 times a year we open it up to any item, whether they're on the agenda or not, and tonight is one of those nights. So if there is anybody in the public that would like to come forward, I didn't get any slips, but you are very welcome to come and address the board. And just so that the public knows, in the future, we do run these every quarter, so keep track of the timing and you may address the board at those times. Thank you. Administrative report, starting with our students. Next month, maybe we should start with the teachers.
So I am going to start tonight. First, I get to talk about French Club. French Club is one of those clubs that meets a little bit more sporadically, kind of like Spanish Club, but they are planning on having a meeting soon, and they are doing something super fun. They are cooking this month, and they're going to start cooking, I think, in Miss Knudsen's room. They're making crepes, or some really fancy word that I have absolutely no clue how to pronounce. Basically, the girl who was explaining it to me told me that it's like a very fancy grilled cheese, and it sounded really delicious, but it's this really fancy French word that I think starts with like a P, but I could not, in the world, God didn't know how to pronounce it. So I'm just going to leave it with really fancy grilled cheese and let you all wonder.
First up, I have student council, and for right now, we're discussing starting to implement assigned parking spots for next year. So students would enter their names, and whoever gets first for like seniors would have top priority in like the better lots, and then from there, the juniors would get the next ones, and then the sophomores once they can drive. And we just thought it would kind of stop from all the buzzing coming in the morning, especially with some of the parking spots like filled with snow right now. You have to get there really early to like get a spot that's not in the very far lot E, so we thought this might be a better idea for that. And also we're talking about rescheduling the blood drive that we missed due to snow days, and then we're planning our upcoming Devil's Lake hiking trip, which we're looking at May 3rd, or maybe sometime when the weather's definitely going to be nicer.
Yeah, we're trying to push it back because, as you can clearly see, it's not getting warm very fast, so we're kind of worried that May 3rd isn't going to be nice and warm for us to be there. So we'll see. We're
Fingers
trying
crossed.
to push Borowski a little bit, but you never know. And then next, I get to talk about Spanish Honor Society. We are actually starting to put in orders for bracelets, and we're doing something in alignment with the Pulsera project. It's an organization that makes bracelets in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and they have all the people make these beautiful bracelets, and they sell them for $5. You can do any type of fundraiser. They send you about 200 bracelets, and we're going to try and do that, and all the proceeds go back to these people that live in Nicaragua and Guatemala. So we're hoping to do something along those lines and do that at the school and maybe kind of spread it around the community as well.
All right, and my next one is the Young Conservatives Club, and for right now, they're just kind of focusing on, well, their discussion of the government shutdown was a really big topic for them last month, and they're just kind of discussing other political news and what it means and how, like, the new members feel about it, and whenever we get new, like, government members or big discussions, how that goes. And they're also planning an upcoming trip to the Capitol, so they can kind of see what they've been learning about, like, in action a little bit more and learn some of Wisconsin's history.
And I have FCCLA, which I believe is Family, Consumer, and Learning. It's really cool, and I don't remember the acronym, but it's a long one and it's really awesome. They're making blankets for women who have been abused, which is really incredible and super cool. They are also just coming off of a cooking competition where they had 5 girls medal, which is pretty awesome. They had cake decorating and cake making and all sorts of cool cooking shows and baking talents, so it was really awesome. And they were very successful.
Right, and I have one last one, Pay It Forward. So coming up on Friday when they have parent-teacher conferences, they have got members of the club to kind of set up a babysitting service, a little bit for parents who are coming in. They can drop off their kid, go meet with they'll be entertained while they meet with their high schoolers' parents. And then also the Try for Kids, which is a little triathlon we have going on in, here if it's Waunakee or Madison, I'm sorry. But they're going to be volunteering for that and helping out.
And then last but not least is DECA. DECA competed at DECA State this past week, March 4th and 6th, and was extraordinarily successful. They're actually sending 4 students to internationals in April, which is pretty awesome. And those 4 students include Olivia Lemansky, who's a sophomore, Kylie Uppana, who's a junior, and Ashwin Devnath, who's also a junior, and Luke Humphrey, who is also a junior. So all 4 of those students will be going to compete in internationals in April, which is super awesome. And I think that's all we have for you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. And next we have the awesome, most awaited for, teacher report.
Alright, so we just have a few things for this month. Number 1, we just did our fundraiser for the shed for WNC. We ended up with $330 from our dine and dough from Rockies, so that was nice. They've also donated their tips back to us to help us raise more money, so that was pretty cool. So thank you to Rockies for that. Another thing that's going on is we are currently taking applications for an Aspiring Educator Scholarship through the WTA. Applications are still being accepted. We have a few in, but we'll be going through those in the next month or 2 and then getting that information out. So we'll have an update for you in the next couple months.
And then the last thing, during the February meeting, you guys voted to kind of forgive 2 of the teacher snow days, and we've heard a lot of really grateful teachers for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that.
That's all.
Thank you. And next would be board reports. If there's any board members that have attended any meetings, conferences, school events that they would like to share with us.
I attended the organizational meeting for the joint review committee for the
Thank you
TIF
for doing that.
district proposed for the Hubby site. And Randy and I met with city officials, Chris Elmer and Todd Schmidt last week. There's currently competing proposals or potentially a competing proposal for the Festival of Foods on the other side of Q. So the next meeting for the joint review is going to be April 15th, where we'll be voting on the TID district.
Thank you.
There'll be some additional information and certain coming out, and we'll share that as it's appropriate and as it's available.
Next item is a discussion of the board seat that was vacated by resignation of David Betcher at our last meeting or after our last meeting. So Randy is going to kind of update us on the process that we've kind of talked about and where we are.
What I want to do is just take a minute to really kind of explain a few items that Joan and I have met with our legal counsel on, just to get some clarification on. As Joan said, following our last board meeting, Dave Betcher submitted his resignation to the board. The reason for doing so was it's also at a time when we had our facilities director position open for applicants. In order to apply, a seated board member needs to relinquish their seat per the Wisconsin ethics laws. So Dave resigned his seat in order to apply for that position, and the process for filling that seat is still underway. That was his purpose for submitting that. A few questions that came out following his resignation were with regards to really filling that seat, particularly given the timelines that we are close to the election. So this seat that David held, his term expires in April. So that he's coming to the very end of his 3-year term. So in speaking with our legal counsel, what we needed to clarify was what does that mean with regards to the status of David's place on that ballot, and how does that all move forward given different scenarios. So there's really 2 different scenarios that present themselves, and I'm going to walk through both of them as just to kind of clarify the situation. So in the event that David were to be offered and he accepted the facilities director's position, his name would still remain on the ballot. So there is a point in time where you need to you put in your paperwork to be on the ballot, and then there is a point in time where you are not able to relinquish your name off of the ballot. So that time from his resignation has passed. So even if he were offered the position in the district and accepted it, his name remains on the ballot. If that scenario moved forward, and then the seat would go to whomever receives the highest votes for that position. If he were to receive the highest votes, then he would have an option of remaining as an employee of the district, and in that seat or in that recommendation, or denying the appointment to the board. If he denied the appointment to the board, then it creates a vacancy of the board, of which then, per our policies, then the board could appoint a member for that position. If you follow the other scenario, which would be if Mr. Betcher was not granted the position in the school district as the facilities director, then his name obviously continues to remain on the ballot, and then if he were to win re-election or win the election, he would then be offered that position. If he accepts it, then he moves forward just as any other candidate would. There is a piece within the state law that talks about how does a board need to move forward with a resignation. So a resignation from the board requires by state statute that the board can appoint, and there's a 60-day kind of period for doing so. Per our attorney's advice to us, since our 60-day timeline takes us after the April election, it is then up to the board as far as if you would appoint in that 1-month interim, or you just wait for the election to take place, and then it moves forward with whatever the results are at the election point. So that's really the status of where we are with that position. So currently, Mr. Betcher is not on the board, and he remains on the ballot for the April election. And then determinant as far as the final decisions with regards to the facilities position really then inform him as far as what his options are given the election in April. So there's a few moving parts here. That's part of why we took some time to really investigate that. And we just wanted to really bring that forward to the full board and the committee, or in the community tonight, to explain exactly what that situation looks like. Any questions? In the event that, just to kind of clarify another piece, in the event that the board does need to ever go through an appointment process for a board member, our policy states that the board will make that determination. In the past, the way the board has done that is through some sort of an application process, and then we've done it through an interview process. I think, Jack, that was how you initially were on the board, was then being selected based on an interview and a voting of the school board at that time. So in the event we ever have a vacancy of that nature, that's kind of how those are filled. But the board has the latitude to determine their process for appointment.
In
Gary?
those cases too, it doesn't matter if it's town of anywhere. So it could be, you could appoint somebody town of Westport even if they're not from Westport?
No,
or
that's
does
not,
have
it would have to, it still stays
have to
true to that
Seat
municipality,
Springfield
that's
or-
it. So if you're talking about the seat we're talking about with David's spot, that is, that's a village seat, so that would have to be a village resident. So in the time period, I think, Jack, when you went through it, there were 3-4 people who put in interest. They were all village residents, and then Jack was a selected appointee and has continued in that position. Any other questions?
In terms of the fact that, from one standpoint, that I know there are multiple people who have already inquired about the position and being in it, should Dave be selected for the facilities position, in that case, I'm assuming you can take the job because that's why he resigned.
That's why he resigned.
There are people who are at least putting themselves out there. I know that one's talked to Dave, one's talked to me. I'm assuming someone's talked to you as well. So that is out there. Secondly, I brought it up earlier, we don't have a board vice president anymore. And while we are only presumably sitting here with 6 members or even 5 for a month or two, I guess make the motion that we have someone selected now. Jack graciously offered himself for this position when I talked to him about it. I know it's a hard job for the next month and a half, but thought it prudent to do in case Joan's not able to do something in the next month.
So, you want to make that motion?
Sure, I would move that we take a vote on a vice president for the Waunakee Community School District Board, and I hereby nominate Jack Heineman.
I guess we need a second of that.
Second.
We probably should, before we vote on Jack, look at any other nominations.
I don't know if this is a discussion before or after, but do we need a vote on whether we're going to leave the seat vacant for the month
For the month.
or you said that's an option, but do we have to vote on whether we choose to fill it or leave it vacant?
I think that is a piece that you should probably talk about, Mark, given that respect.
Let's,
Deal with that.
So I
Deal
don't
with
want to
your
confuse,
motion
but
first.
let's finish
Deal with
the,
motion first.
any other nominations for the vice? Hearing none, all in favor of Jack taking that position, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we should deal with Mark's. Are we in agreement that we leave it vacant for the month until the election?
I would leave it vacant.
Yeah, it seems difficult especially with a spring break coming up next week and the election really only 2 weeks after that time frame. It would be difficult to organize an appointment.
And that would be allowable per the advice from Kirk Strang, our attorney. He shared that since our 60-day time frame would fall, I believe, in mid-April, that would be after the election. So we could utilize that as the mechanism to fill to set in motion what the steps are for filling that position.
And I move that we leave the seat vacant for the remainder of the term.
Or is that what Jack just said?
No,
No.
I think you're making the motion, I can make the motion, and
Jack.
I'm seconding it.
Oh, okay.
Any other discussion on leaving that open or filling it somehow? If not, all in favor of the motion of just leaving it empty for the month?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you. Is that enough for you?
I think that covers all the things that I think we need to cover.
Okay, perfect. Next, we just need to clarify the evaluation schedule. So I believe everybody has done the board self-evaluation. I guess I'm looking at
The school
Rebecca.
perceptions?
The school perceptions.
Yes.
And then there are a couple other documents that Rebecca sent out about 2 weeks ago on the priorities and on Randy's, the general criteria of the superintendent. And we would need all of that filled out. In addition, we have like a 4-question open-ended. And if all of that could be done by the end of the month, then given to Rebecca. And currently, we have the meeting to go over all of those evaluations on April 16th.
I
But-
now have a conflict
yeah.
with that date and in all likelihood will not be here. So
So would we entertain changing that date? I think it's important that everybody is here, or as many members as possible. And knowing that we have a conflict in advance, I guess I would like to look at a different date.
Just for clarification's sake, so the purpose for doing them, doing it before the 22nd of April, because that is the point where we have our new board is taking,
Right.
that's when the new board takes place. So it has to be before the 22nd of April. And we also wanted to do that when we had current board in place, given the evaluation nature of what we were talking about.
Can we do it on the 15th? Or are you gonna be out just the
I'm
16th?
gonna be out until the 18th.
So what about the week before? At the end of, we have board meeting on the 8th. Could we do it on like the 10th or 11th? No?
Not available on
You're
either
not
of those.
available for those days.
The 9th, I am.
The 9th, right after the board meeting?
The
on
board
the
meeting on the
9th?
8th, and this would be on the 9th.
Is that-
works.
The 9th would work.
Is that any problem with you, Rebecca, getting this done?
Nope.
The
As long as
9th?
you guys all turn it into me timely.
If we timely get it to, is that working for the 9th, changing that meeting?
That would be at 6 o'clock.
I think
We
said
had the
5
sixth,
before.
yeah, we
Five.
had the 15th at.
Yeah.
Can we do it at 6?
We can do it at 6.
Sure.
6 o'clock.
So I do need a motion for that since it's scheduling a special meeting.
I move we move the special meeting for the evals to April the 9th at 6 p.m.
Anybody second that?
Second.
Any other discussion, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, we have the Human Growth and Development Report. I think Janet is with us.
Yep, Janet Thomas is with us this evening.
Welcome.
She shared with you last month, but was not able to be here in person. So she is going to just update you on where she is with the Human Growth and Development Committee, some changes in the appointments, and then also answer any questions that you may have.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I apologize I wasn't able to be here last month, so thanks for your flexibility in having me back today. The memo that I'm sending around is the one that I had prepped for you the last month, with just a few changes on the back, particularly around the committee members. We've had some fluctuation in people and their commitments, which is understandable, but I think we're pretty set on the committee now. We ended up with 3 parents, and we have our healthcare provider, our clergy member, and I'm excited that we have actually 4 students, 2 boys and 2 girls. So I think that will be really helpful. I think we've all found that the student voice has been really important in making some of these decisions, so I'll be looking forward to that. You can look over the memo, but really just remembering that it has been a while since we reviewed this topic and this curriculum. There's been a lot of work that has been done up to this point, and there will be a lot of work that will be done after the committee meetings.
the members of the committee are really just going to be reviewing the current practices. We're going to be looking at some of the data that we have around some of the surveys that we've done with health classes and our Dane County Youth Assessment. We're also going to be looking at some curricular options and reviewing a proposed scope and sequence that then the committee will come back to you for with their recommendations. I'll also be really engaging other stakeholders. As you remember, we wanted to keep this committee small, and I think that's still important to really do to be productive. But I have been engaging the health teachers and the school counselors, and I will be speaking with the nurses and other teachers that really do this work on an annual basis. So, any questions?
Do you have an initial meeting plan?
Yes, so we have 3 tentative dates. I don't want to say them right now,
Okay,
but it'll
that's
be
fine.
in April and May. So I think maybe the 3rd week in April, 3rd or 4th week in April will be the first one, and we'll be done by mid-May. So
Janet's in the process of kind of finalizing those dates with the committee, and once those are there, she and I have talked that these are publicly noticed meetings, so that'll be a piece that we will be going through our regular channels as an advisory committee per our policies and discussions.
Great.
thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Janet.
Strategic planning, budget planning. Probably Steve?
Thank you, Joan. So there's quite a bit of information in this PowerPoint, so I'm going to do my best to kind of move through it quickly. If you have any questions as I go through, please feel free to stop me and I'll cover that topic a little bit more. As far as the overview of what's included in this presentation, it ranges from a review of what the goals were last year, what's been accomplished in the last year, a timeline for our 1920 budget process, what's new in the budget planning process, the state budget proposal, budget planning process requests, and then 1920 goals. When the presentation is done, we're going to actually click over and pull up the governor's budget proposal for education. We have that attached in board book. I know a couple of you are going to an event this week, and so I want to make sure we have a few minutes to talk about what the governor did propose in the education budget for the state of Wisconsin. As you know, this is the strategic planning framework for the school district. In 2018-19, we identified 5 goals that we were working through in this topic of resource allocation. I touched on each of these goals and really what was accomplished between February of 2018 and January of 2019. You are familiar with the majority of what you see on these screens because they have been brought to you at one point or another through various school board committees or action from the entire school board. One thing I want to point out, we've talked a lot about, what are we actually doing with decisions and how are decisions then impacting our budget. And as an example that I think it's something we should be proud of as far as a reallocation change that we've made, the school board approved an investment in telecommunications budget a couple summers ago based on seeing data that showed that our school district was the highest spending school district in Dane County on telecommunications. Over the last couple of years, we've been able to reduce our telecommunications budget from $240,000 down to $200,000 and then down to $150,000 because of that investment in new telecommunications equipment. So this is an actual example of how we've been able to bring information forward. As school board members, you've then taken action on some type of investment that then turns around and allows us to reallocate funds in different areas. Another reallocate goal that we've talked about in the past where the school board took action was in the area of utility usage. As you know, last year, the facility committee made a recommendation to move forward 2 years worth of energy conservation projects in our 2018-19 budget. So we just recently finished some of that work last fall, and so we do not have a visual that shows you what that impact is, but we will be bringing that forward. So that's another example of bringing information to the board where you then took action to invest funds so that we can reallocate dollars in a different place. One thing that you probably weren't aware of, we did have a portion of our administrative retreat last June focused on teaching all of the members of our administrative team how to use this data analytic tool. We did determine school peers for each of our school buildings in the district, and we also prepared an activity for each school building to go through during our administrative retreat. So it was a very useful period of time for us. If you remember the budget goal, we had a goal of trying to take a look at how our supply and non-capital funds were used. As a result of that, we implemented a per student allocation model for grades K through 8 for the 18-19 school year and developed budgets based on team or grade level approaches instead of individual teacher budgets. So this is the first year where we put this in place. So you'll see later on when we talk about goals for the future, we need to analyze the results from this year to really determine whether or not it met our goals. And of course, we've talked about the strategic planning goal in the long-range facility plan and facility maintenance plan as well. As we move forward to the 2019-20 process, one of the things to keep in mind is what's unique about this spring compared to last spring is we are in a state budget process. So unlike last spring when we moved this timeline sooner, we are in a period of time where we will not know for many months moving forward what the actual final allocation of resources will be to public school districts. We do have some new data analytics that we're looking at this year. We have revised some of our peer groups. What you see on the screen is a new analytic that was put forward by Forecast 5 that's a really interesting one that really basically tracks our student enrollment change over time to our FTE change for members of the teaching staff. So you can see how tightly aligned our budget process has been going all the way back to the first year of this data, which was 2007, which really leads us to believe that as our student enrollment is increasing, we are appropriately investing in teacher resources to match that increase in student enrollment.
So
We did, go ahead.
Excuse me, is the blue students and the yellow teachers?
So the blue, oh, the key's not on this. Thank you for
Yeah.
noticing that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I can't tell off the top of my head. Later on in board packet, we actually have the whole document where the key's included. We just grabbed a little snippet and didn't have the key. So thank you for noticing that. But we actually, in the full budget document, have another analytic that shows for non-teaching staff, our process has not been so tight. So you see wide variations of our increases in staff that are non-teaching staff compared to our increase in student enrollment. So it is something we want to take a closer look at as we move forward. We've talked before about new federal accounting requirements began for the 18-19 fiscal year. All school level financial data has already been reported on a budget basis to the DPI and will be reported again to the DPI on an actual basis later on. The Department of Public Instruction has notified school districts that they are going to be releasing the school level budget financial data publicly sometime in March or April. They are still going through that data and taking some additional checks on it, but it will be released publicly within the next month or so. With school level financial data taking place, you're going to start seeing analytics occurring at the building level that includes finances, academic staffing, all wrapped up into one process. And as an example, this is from Forecast 5, just picking one particular school, and it's a dashboard that's being built that includes a wide variety of data. Soon you will be able to see student spending data included in a dashboard like this. So as soon as that information is released, you're going to start seeing data coming together that really combines not only the financial but the academic and staffing all into one analytic or dashboard for viewing. We'll come back to the state budget proposal in a moment. Later on in the agenda tonight, you will see a recommendation from the Budget Committee to approve the budget planning process for the 2019-20 fiscal year. In that process is a recommendation to approve the following this evening. That would be a second grade teacher at Prairie Elementary School, 2 fifth grade teachers at the intermediate school, 2.9 FTE teaching positions for enrollment growth, basically between the high school and specialist positions as determined through the scheduling process, as well as an assistant principal at the high school. So we'll come back to that later tonight, but I wanted to point out what those major requests were moving forward for later this evening. As we move forward to 2019-20, we want to continue to have goals to bring forward for our resource allocation process. We've identified 4 goals that we want to continue moving forward with. As you can see under goal 3, we really need to analyze the results of the per student allocation model for grades K through 8 and look at opportunities to create a per student allocation model for grades 9 through 12 and research staffing allocation models for instructional support positions. While our process currently does a nice job of really bringing forward to you requests for core teaching positions, we have not yet identified how do positions like math and reading interventionists or other positions change as enrollment changes. So we're looking to bring forward some processes that will connect those two as well. And I'm going to just take a moment and switch out of this PowerPoint and bring up the budget proposals. Go back if you want to click on the second one. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you could scroll down, Rebecca. Okay, right there. So one of the main things that we're going to be hearing in the next couple of weeks is a discussion over state equalization aid versus per pupil aid. So what the governor proposed under the first bullet point was an investment in state equalization aid. The governor's proposing over $600 million being invested into state equalization aid, as well as transferring the school levy credit and first dollar tax credit into the general equalization aid formula. In the last state budget, the focus was the per pupil aid, categorical aid. The governor's proposing changing that focus to the equalization aid process. So as you see that first bullet point, that is a significant investment into equalization aid. There is going to be quite a bit of conversation over the next couple of months. You'll hear a lot about state equalization aid versus per pupil categorical aid. and there's very strong differences of opinion between the two. The governor's position is that additional funds to education should be invested into the state general equalization formula, not the per pupil categorical aid formula. So Rebecca, if you could scroll to the next page, please. Right there. So the second bullet point, the governor is proposing a revenue limit adjustment of $200 per student in 1920 and $204 per student in 2021. So in recent years, the revenue limit adjustment has been 0, but there has been a per pupil categorical aid increase. In the last state budget, it was $200 in the first year, $204 in the second year. So the governor is not looking at a significant change in the amount we're receiving per student, but it's how we would be receiving it, which is very different. So the governor is proposing state equalization aid matched with a revenue limit increase, as opposed to the current state budget is a per pupil categorical aid increase combined with a $200 and $204 increase. The main difference between the two is the per pupil approach provides the exact same amount of funding to every district in the state, whether you are a district that receives very little state equalization aid or whether you receive a lot. It is just a flat amount, each district receives the same. Under the equalization aid formula, the amount of funding going to districts varies widely based on where you are in the formula. That was the intent of the equalization aid formula when it was originally put in place in Wisconsin, was it is connected to the property tax levy, intended to equalize the amount of resources any school district might receive. So there is a major change being proposed from one approach to another. In the end, the school district's budget, as proposed, would be a $200 increase in the first year, $204 in the second year, which is very similar to the state budget that we're in right now. The major difference, Rebecca, if you could scroll down a little bit more, is the special education aid. So right there perfectly. So what you're seeing on the bullet point for special education aid is a significant investment in state special education reimbursement. The governor's proposing an increase of $75 million in 2019-20 and $531 million in 2020-2021. That investment would change the reimbursement from the state from approximately 25% to 30% and then to 60%. So as an example, the 25% is slightly over $1.5 million, so in our district. So if that number were to change to 60%, that is a very significant increase in special education aid. Special education aid, because it is a categorical aid, is outside the revenue limit formula, meaning those would be funds coming back to the school district that would be able to be expended. So that's basically the main difference in this proposal from Governor Evers, is a significant investment in state special education aid. So that's probably the second thing that you will hear discussed quite a bit in the next couple of months, is that very large investment in the state special education categorical aid. It has been a number of years since there has been a significant increase in state special education categorical aid. So what has happened is the reimbursement percentage just keeps dropping. So earlier on in my career, it was in the 30s. And it just keeps dropping each year, it gets lower, lower. It'll end up being 24% the following year. If we don't see an additional investment, it just keeps dropping. So that is the most significant change from what we've seen in recent years, is that investment that is outside of the revenue limit. So that is a very positive investment for schools. One of the things that there will probably be some type of common agreement on is special education aid. The Blue Ribbon Commission, which was a bipartisan work group that spent about a year studying school finance, one of the main pieces in their recommendation was special education aid. So there seems to be some support for now taking a look at the special education aid and making some type of an investment. But for those of you going to the WCSD event this week, you're probably going to be hearing a lot about state special education aid. You're probably also going to be hearing a lot about state equalization aid versus the per pupil categorical aid. And there's quite a few other bullet points I'm not going to get into right now. Many of them are important, but just not at the same scope of the ones I pointed out this evening. So are there any questions or comments?
You made a statement about the levy credit, which helps usually richer districts. That would be the best way to say it. And he took that away.
You want to scroll back a little bit, Rebecca?
Well, yeah.
To the previous page. Yeah, we'll go back to that, Gary, because that's a big point. Yeah, that first bullet point there. So that second sentence is a big one, as you pointed out, Gary. To ensure that state support goes directly to districts, transfer the school levy tax credit and the first dollar tax credit into general equalization aids beginning in the fiscal year 2020-2021. So there were many years where the state budget, instead of investing in public schools, invested in the school levy tax credit, which counts in the state funding as school funding. However, that goes out to districts based on property tax levy paid. So to your point, communities who wouldn't receive funds typically through equalization aid do receive it through the school levy credit. So this is a major change being proposed.
My question was related to the special ed portion. So if they're making an agreement or a commitment to cover a higher percentage of those costs, I'm assuming those two would be based on current spending and current student counts. So are they looking to data from us in terms of number of students and what the cost of educating those students currently are? And then if they're agreeing to a commitment up to 60% as a goal, for instance, and currently they're doing less than 30, that difference in what we've been covering, will we be allowed to move that to a different part of our budget?
That's a great question. So what Julie's referring to is special education in Wisconsin is identified in a specific accounting fund called Fund 27. Whatever is not covered by state or federal funding, the school district through our Fund 10 contributes and pays into Fund 27, so it balances. What this would do is it would significantly increase the amount of funding going into Fund 27 from the state, which would then change the amount of money that the school district needs to take general fund dollars to have it be balanced. So yes, that's exactly what would happen.
Then in terms of the revenue limit adjustment, it's a little bit less what's offered in year one compared to year one of this past biennial budget. Is that the average, or is that actually the dollar amount that would go per student per district? Because I thought you said with the categorical it was based on students only, whereas with the governor's plan it's on the equalization. So is that simply an average per student, so we might get less than that?
That's a great question. So what would happen under this provision is every district would be able to raise their revenue limit by the $200 or the $204. But unlike the per pupil categorical aid, which exactly matches the 200 or 204, the governor's suggesting coming in with the equalization aid formula instead, which varies widely depending on what district you're in. So the impact on particular taxpayers would vary depending on what district you're in. However, by putting all of the funds from the school levy credits into the equalization aid formula, the governor has put out information previously that showed school districts were going to come out very positive from this and their taxpayers because of all of that money being redirected to equalization aid. However, to the point you brought up, Gary, the school levy credit, which taxpayers see on their bill, we don't see that. The school levy credit would go away under this proposal. It's being transferred completely into the
So
aid
they're not
formula.
gonna get the equalized, and then they're not gonna get the levy, which helped them with that. There's gonna be some breaking in some districts, some big that would guess.
So it's just a different approach than what has been proposed the last couple of years. And there's a number of other things that are being proposed as well that are investments in schools ranging from mental health. You can see it as you take a look at it. I just wanted to point out the big items that were being proposed and just what we need to kind of keep our eye on. When we put together the first draft of the budget, we are looking at the $200. We have not put into our budget planning process the additional aid coming in from special education. If that occurs, that would be wonderful. But as far as our planning process, we're not building our budget assuming that's going to happen. We'd rather build our budget conservatively on the $200, which is what we've been receiving in recent years. And if additional funds become available, that would be wonderful. We'd be able to incorporate it into our process at that time.
And again, this is the governor's proposed budget, correct?
Yes.
Which
Yep.
the legislature kind of already has gone on record saying, we're throwing that in the trash bin and we're starting from zero-based budget, which means crafting their own ideas, correct?
Yeah, and that's a great point. So that what could happen is an alternative to this could be somebody proposing going back to the per pupil categorical aid of $200 or $204 like we have under this state budget. So I think you will hear a lot of conversations about the two very different ways of approaching this. The governor's proposal and then probably what will be discussed in the legislature will probably be what we're currently doing. What would be of great benefit to schools, however, would be the increase, any increase at all, or increased investment into the special education categorical aid would be a huge positive for public schools. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for always explaining it so that we understand it. I appreciate that. Any questions for Steve before we move on? Okay, administrative report action, consideration of a school board purchase for our baseball program.
So if you recall back last spring, we had a conversation with our baseball parents who were looking at a multi-phase fundraising effort to improve our baseball facilities. If you recall last spring, they were raising funds for specifically dugouts, a cap to some of the fences, and those items were accomplished. We also at that point approved them to continue fundraising for phase 2, part of which included scoreboards. So what's in front of you tonight is a request for approval for the scoreboards that they have fundraising dollars already aligned for, so there's no cost to the district. And then they will continue to raise some of the funds for some of the other items that were on their Phase 2 list. I think they had a batter's eye, which was a black screen out in the outfield, and a few other items. But the item in front of you this evening is to approve the scoreboard purchases based off of funds that were raised by the group that was in front of us a year ago.
Just something to add, Randy, real quick. Rebecca's been in contact with the Waunakee Area Education Foundation confirming the balances in all of these accounts. And we have pulled out the funds for the first round of the baseball work, and we have verified that the funds are available so that we are able to pull the funds. So if you do approve this tonight, the purchase actually comes through the district. So we actually issue the purchase ourselves, we pay for it, and then working with Rebecca, we get the balances from Waunakee Area Education Foundation, pull the funds back so that we can then put it back into our funds. But we've been able to work with them in a real positive way, and we've been able to verify that they do have more funds available in their WAIF account than we've pulled out so far for what has already been approved by the school board.
Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consideration for the fiscal agent of our drug-free schools grant.
Yeah, as a means of introduction, I see we have a few people here, Brian Kirsten, Jody Sorensen. I see Joe Peterson is here as well, representing some of the work that the Waunakee Cares Coalition has done. What you have in front of you tonight and what I think Brian and Jody are going to walk us through is really a presentation that introduces you to some of the work that they are looking to accomplish. And the request in front of you tonight is for us to serve as the fiscal agent, which means that we really basically hold and monitor those funds for the grant that you've applied for on a community basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to explain the details.
So let me ask this question first, I guess. Do you want us to go through the entire presentation in a very detailed way? I'm going to make an assumption, which I know is dangerous, that you maybe had a chance to look at the presentation. So we can look at it two ways. We've been told 3 to 5 minutes. You know me well enough to know that that's challenging in and of itself.
Well, I talk fast.
And Jordy talks fast. But, so between the two of us, that might be a reasonable time frame. But I guess more than anything, what we want to do is make sure we have time, that we're efficient with your time, and that you have your questions answered in regards to the presentation too. So just slide through the slides real quickly here.
You can give the kind of the high overview of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay,
We can
so
do
then
that.
go back. I gotta do my little,
Okay,
okay, I'm a
there you
little
go.
nervous, because
You don't
some of
need
you
to-
are my former teachers, and, I'm just a little nervous, but anyways, as Randy said, I'm Jody Sorensen. I'm here for the Waunakee Community Cares Coalition. I'm a member of this community. I grew up here. I'm a parent. I also work for the village as the court clerk, so, this has a big passion for me, just, seeing our youth. We wanna help make them healthy and resilient. So, I was just going to give you a little background of our coalition. I know you guys have probably read in the paper and have heard about it. Randy's been very active with us, and so is Kurt Ely and other folks. But we were established back in October of 2014. And we basically provide a lot of information to our community on youth substance use, vaping, mental health, marijuana use, prescription opioids, and mental health. And we continue to provide this training and opportunities within our community, such as we've had Narcan trainings. We've sent some of our youth to some youth summits. We are hosting a drug impairment for training education professionals at the end of May that I know some of our staff and our school districts are going. We've also held many town hall meetings, anywhere from topics of underage drinking, to vaping, to juuling, to mental health, and the stigma that comes with that. And we just started doing our hidden in plain sight rooms to bring awareness to our parents, what they need to look for maybe in their rooms for information on, is their kid using or is their kid not using. We just did our second one tonight. I was over at the high school during parent-teacher conferences. We already had like 16 people come through. I give Jessie Main a lot of credit. She's been purchasing all that stuff. But and we did it in January during our Vape and Jewel presentation. We had like 60 parents come through, so, and everyone's been very complimentary and educational, and I think we scared a few parents, but I think we also scare, I don't want, that's not our purpose, but to just educate them and give them some awareness. We also are hosting our third drug take-back day at the end of April. We've had 2 past ones that been very successful. Over 70 pounds of prescription and non-prescription drugs have been just on those days, let alone it's available all the time at the Waunakee Police Department. It's a permanent lockbox there. Speaking of lockboxes, we have also given out over 500 lockboxes to the community to help with prevention, to lock up those meds and keep them out of our little kids and our youth and also the older community, as well as we've given out Deterra packets, almost 100 of those. It's an easier way, if you can't get to the lock drop, you can put your medicine in there, it disposes of it, and you can discard of it safely. All right. And our most exciting thing that I think we've done, we just met with the village board, and we had electronic devices added to the smoke-free law that's in Wisconsin. It was Waunakee for the ordinances. It passed 5-1 with the village board. So, so that was, we felt really good about that, and we love the support from the village board. And with this Drug Free Community Grants, you want to go to the next slide? Yeah. We have the Drug Free Community Grant really make sure we get all 12 of these sectors. And in preparing for writing for this Drug Free Community Grant, we have developed 2 very strong logic models, and we decided to focus on underage drinking and vape, based off of the data that we've gotten from the Dane County Youth Assessment Survey. We've had some listening sessions in the high school and middle school last year, and then we did the parent survey, and then we've had, so those are the 2 that we're gonna focus on. But with this, the Drug Free Community Grant is a grant established by Congress. Usually it's already out. SAMHSA used to oversee it, and now they're not overseeing it. So the grant actually officially hasn't come out yet, because usually it's out in mid-January, and it's due by March 29th. So we keep telling us every 2 weeks it's gonna come out, and we haven't heard anything yet. But the grant requires diverse community representation. As we know, youth substance is not just a job of the school district to fix. It's not just the role of the law enforcement or a matter of better parenting. It really does take the entire community, including the youth, to coming together to change these issues. The Waunakee Community Cares Coalition has representation from all these sectors, and I'm actually more proud about our youth, because we have the Above the Influence group. Anea that was here earlier has come, and Maddie Zaleski comes every meeting, every month. She's a sophomore at the high school and is kind of our liaison between the high school and us, which I think is just, I can't speak more about our youth here. And all those other sectors, I can go through all of them if you want, but we have those all covered. Some multiple, like I'm a parent, but I also work in local government. We have a lot of Dane County Public Health members that live in our community and are also parents, so they're on our committee. Our religious, we have all the clergy involved with us. The school, I mean, we have so much good representation there. Our law enforcement, Lieutenant Peterson comes. The healthcare professional, I know they're busy, but Dr. Random has showed every once in a while. But we got I think we got all those covered. So I can go into more if you want, but. So basically the Drug Free Community Grant really focuses on these 7 strategies. And based on our logic models, we have come up with strategies to provide information all the way down to modifying change in policies for each logic model that we have for vape and underage drinking. And if you use these 7 strategies, there's proven data that shows that the Drug Free Community Grant does work, and it does decrease alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana. You may ask why we chose not to focus on marijuana or prescription drugs for this. It's because we have other grants that we have written for, some small ones that we felt covered enough to help us still focus on that. And with these logic models, we're always going to cross paths focusing on mental health or marijuana or prescription drug use. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
All right.
Any questions on my first 3 slides? If you have questions, I have more information to share, but Brian's going to go more into what the fiscal agent is going to look like with you and us. So.
Thanks, Julia. So really what we're looking at or talking about here is the grant information. You can see if we're fortunate enough that the coalition's fortunate enough to receive a drug-free community grant. It's $125,000 every year for 5 years with the ability to reapply for another 5 years for another $125,000. It's a matching kind contribution. We feel very strongly that as a coalition that's not going to be a problem for us in terms of the work that we're doing right now. We don't have, it's kind of interesting real quickly, we don't have a lot of money, but we haven't, I wouldn't say that we've had to go out and work diligently for the money that has come into the coalition. I think our budget right now, or what we have to deposit is about $23,000 roughly. And so what we've been able to do with that up to this point in time, you'll see again the advertisement on the large billboard as you come in town, the electronic one. Last year we bought ad space there for the first time. This year we're going to do the same. So we've been able to, and Jordy and the coalition has been really good about helping fund, if we bring speakers into the schools, that type of thing, there's money available for that. So we've been trying to, give back within the framework of what we're able to afford to do at this point in time already as well. The goals are pretty straightforward, to establish and strengthen collaboration, and we are, as go back and take a look at the slide that Jordy presented, you can see it's a very collaborative framework and effort that we're working towards right now within the coalition. And then simply to reduce youth substance abuse, and as Jordy alluded to, the two primary areas right now that we are focused on are alcohol and vaping, basically, because those have truly risen to the surface from the data that we've been able to collect from a variety of sources right now as well. The organizational chart that we're working from right now, and I will give a quick shout out to Sarah Johnson. Sarah actually lives in Milton right now, but she works for Dane County Public Health. She has served as the role of, in many of these roles before in Rock County, and she has been an invaluable resource to us right now as we've gone through and worked to position ourselves to have the grant, to be at a point where we can hopefully get this grant written as soon as it's released. And then just as we've gone through and taken a look at our structure of the coalition. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of these boxes, but you can see there will be a board of directors, there's executive committees, there's ad hoc committees that are there as well in that middle. But the one that we would just like to draw your attention to is that one on the far right, the fiscal agent, because what is needed as part of the grant writing process is to have a fiscal agent. In some communities, that fiscal agent has been the hospital. In some communities, it's been municipal government. And in this case, what we're hoping is that you as the board would entertain the school district here being the partner fiscal agent with the coalition. We've had that conversation. Coalition members have had that conversation with Steve, and Randy's aware of this as well. The way that this would look right now is the staff involved in the fiscal agent portion of things. There's a program director, principal investigator. Kurt Ely has graciously said that he would be interested in assuming that role should you make a decision to go forward and support this request. The project coordinator position would be a hired position, and that would be a position, again, that Kurt would have input into along with the coalition in terms of who's going to basically be that person who's going to be coordinating the activities. Because right now, the structure that we have in place, Jody's the clerk, I'm the principal, Joe's the lieutenant. Ryan Sheehan works for Dane County Public Health Tobacco Coalition. Jeff Lafferty's an epidemiologist of the state. We all pitch in and do what we can. But it would be really nice, and I think be a situation if we do receive the grant, to have one person who can do that work and move the work forward, because I think that could be tremendously impactful here in our community. And then again, the business official. And that's the key part. We, just as you have many safeguards in place in terms of how disbursements are made and how money is allocated and money again is dispersed, this grant requires that as well. And so that's a conversation that we've had with Steve. It shows Steve is the name there, and in reality, I think what that would entail, again, is Steve being able to designate an individual within the business team here that would be willing to take that on, and that position the district would be compensated back from the grant for that work as well. So there isn't an expectation that would be an in-kind type situation. Any questions on the organizational chart?
What happens after you're successful with the getting the grant? 5 years goes along, you don't get the second 5 years. Do we still, does that person, become a employee of the school district, or the grant goes away, that employee?
Grant goes away, the employment, that position
Is that the way we're
goes away.
structuring
Right,
it?
and that would be, I mean, and that is the reality of it, is on, because there wouldn't be, I mean, the person, right, if the district agrees to become the fiscal agent, that coordinator becomes an employee of the district. But if the grant money's there, you know, if the grant money's not there and that dries up, there's no money basically to fund that coordinator position at that point. Jody, you have?
The goal of the DFC grant, sorry, I use acronyms all the time, so Drug Free Community Grant, DFC, is to help a coalition sustain. Like, it's giving us tools and trainings, and we have to do so much for this grant that it's hopefully after 5 years and hopefully another 5 years, we're able to sustain. So a project coordinator wouldn't say go away, but if we, you know, we're supposed to make sure we're sustainable, that we can still have this 500,000, like we can get the money in and get other grants and get other donations and the community involved. So that's the goal of the, if you don't get that goal at the end of the 5 or 10 years, then you really haven't done the DFC grant correctly. That's what we've been told by people that have gotten it in communities. Like he mentioned Sarah Johnson, she was in Rock County, and they don't have they're sustainable. They have like people underneath the project coordinator now. They have like 4 or 5 different positions, and they're running great things down in Rock County. So that's the goal. But yes, I think if we don't get it after 5 years, then, I mean, maybe we will be sustainable after 5 years. We've been doing a lot now with our little bit of monies that we've gotten, so.
The goal is sustainability,
Yes.
obviously.
So basically, the role of the school district is to act as a trustee of the money, to monitor the spending and to provide a safekeeping for it during this process.
That's
Correct.
accurate.
That's very accurate, yes.
Or another way to look at it, you're asking us to open another account that's specifically dedicated so that when the grant money comes in, it's one of the umbrellas under a new account that Steve would create, correct? And then
Yes.
Yeah.
he would be responsible, one of his people would help be the liaison and manage and track those funds,
Be accountable
correct?
for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we-
currently,
we-
oh, go ahead, sorry, Randy.
Go ahead, Jody.
No,
Sorry.
currently, Barb Salverson at the high school, when we get our grant monies in and our $200 from different meetings, I give her I usually give them to Brian,
You
but
would
sometimes
be
I
giving
stop by and say hi to
Barb.
Barb. since I-
So it's flowing through your office right
Yes.
now? It just
Yeah.
would be more district-based?
Yes.
Yeah, we've entered in these types of agreements in other areas. I mean, Dane County New Teacher Project is one that we hold.
Okay.
I mean, you see that comes up on our annual report every year. That's a consortium of districts. We belong to the apprenticeship program, Dane County Apprenticeships. That's held by Monona Grove, and we are a contributing district to it. This is something just very similar, it's just local, where we're serving as really the fiscal agent to help manage these funds, and then they're able to run the program. Similarly to how we've done those in other areas.
But the project coordinator is a Waunakee school employee.
The project coordinator, if you become the fiscal agent, yes, just like in Stoughton, for example, they would have become an employee of Stoughton Hospital or, yeah, exactly.
Like
So
when you look at like our apprenticeship model, Josh Fossil is the director of the Dane County Apprenticeship, is an employee of Monona Grove, funded by the consortium. If the consortium disbands, that position disbands.
So Steve, would you anticipate that being a new hire, not just additional workload on one of your other people? Or what is the presumption of how that would work?
So are you talking about the business official on the bottom?
Right.
That would be, oops, sorry, are you gonna go ahead to that?
Well, I was gonna, because I think, go ahead, you answer, then I think that's all to speak to.
What we would be doing is taking that piece on in our business office, because when you think about the payroll person, the project coordinator, that's just gonna happen automatically through payroll, very minimal work involved with that. And what we would end up doing is the project coordinator would probably have a credit card and probably do a lot of their purchasing that way. So I don't view it as a significant work task for our office. I view it as something that we would be able to just handle, like we do the new teacher center or other things that come up.
Does your project coordinator become kind of a fundraiser then too, a grant writer? How do you keep on writing grants and finding grants or soliciting more funds?
We're a part of the Southern Alliance for Wisconsin Youth that I attend quarterly, and every time we go to that meeting, we get $200. And there's also a grant that we get from them that we work on, and that's like $2,500. But being a part of that group, they let us know of other grants that we can get, like the Strategic Prevention Opioid Grant that we got $8,500 this past year to do different things with that money. So being a part of them, they give us, and we're also part of the PFS 15 grant that we get like $4,000 or $5,000 from that. So being a part of them, we get other grant opportunities. But yes, right now I believe with the, basically, I wouldn't say I'm the project coordinator, but I kind of do that role. I find a function that way. The village has been gracious enough to give me some work hours, as well as I do a lot on my own. Like, tonight I'm here on my own, and I do other things. And they're kind of, that's why we have the chairperson. Like, the chairperson is still going to be the face of the coalition. The project coordinator works for the coalition to get us, go to the trainings, get us the things, and write the grant monies. And we got to, and the next slides will kind of explain what our roles will be, trying to hire that person. But that's, does that answer your question?
The project coordinator becomes kind of the grant writer, looking for more funds, whether it's through your coalition or through other means.
Yep. And I would say, Jack, too, that it's a very collaborative structure too. So that may be that project coordinator working with a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee that's involved in doing the grant writing for the coalition, and we bring that information back to the committee as a whole.
Where does this person sitting then, the project coordinator, where would you sit, in the high school or out here?
We're getting to that. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that's a great segue for us here, and we'll get to that here in just a second too. So, what's the role basically of Waunakee Cares? You can see it's getting the work done, getting action plans put together. There's a lot of training that's involved for that coordinator, as I understand it. Minimum, if that grant were to come through and we'd receive the grant, I know that right away, I think there is a 4-week training that person has to go to, and then there's several other trainings during the course of the year too. So there's a pretty, it's I'm not gonna say it's time intensive, but there are expectations that go along with that person to make sure that they are fully trained and qualified and ready to do that work as well.
And also to get up to speed with what we've already been doing. I think it's going to be a lot of time for them as well.
The match and in-kind requirements, we've already spoken to that, because that's on us too, or on the coalition, is to go out and continue to find that money to be sustainable, along with the grant money that would be coming in. And then, again, that partnership, as I alluded to, with the fiscal agent, if you decide to make that decision to enter into that agreement, would be to oversee the coordinator position, whomever is hired for that position. Fiscal agent role, this is kind of what we already were touching, some of the questions here. So again, we tried to spell that out. It would be just managing the funds, the reporting requirements that go along with it. Partnership with the Waunakee Cares Board of Directors, having those conversations too. There is, if possible, it'd be great to have office space. I know part of the discussion that was that we engaged in with Steve and with Randy is if there's potential to have space similar to what the Joining Forces for Family has at Heritage right now with, I think, his Dane County New Teacher Project over there. So, and of course that could be rental that would come back and be paid by the coalition for renting that space as well, if that's the way that the district wanted to structure that type of agreement, if they chose to do that. So, that's really, I'll go back to that, that's really all that we had to share with you this evening, other than wearing my coalition hat today, not my principal's hat, and Jody wearing her coalition hat, not the clerk hat. Would just respectfully request that you would consider entering into that agreement and arrangement, and be allow us to work with you as the fiscal agent, allow the coalition to work with you as the fiscal agent.
So, do you need matching grant or in-kind or matching funds for this grant?
Yes, once the grant comes out, we will have a couple of committees. We've done a lot of the work. We've got our logic models done. We've got agreements. Yeah, but we do have to do a budget. We have to have a budget when we write the grant that shows what, we're gonna use the $125,000 that they're giving us, and then what we're matching that. And that can be from office space at the village hall. If they're gonna give it to us for free right now, we can say that it charges us $50 a month to rent that space, so
Is
yes.
there a requirement for matching?
Yes, $125,000.
So 125,000 they give you and then matching 120?
Yes,
So it's
in kind,
one
yeah,
match.
yeah, 120, yeah, one match, yes.
Okay.
And that's the-
Which is the other reason why it's trying to help you be sustainable after. That's what the goal it is you gotta match it, so that you gotta figure that out as you go forward, so.
The district's commitment right now would be anything that we would find in kind. It's really where we're at, and the other fiscal dollars would be something that the coalition would work on.
Or the minimal work involved in setting up a new account.
Right.
Do you have any concerns, Steve? I guess I'm
No,
just.
I don't.
No.
Okay.
I just have two questions. First, do you already have someone in mind for this project coordinator position?
I'm not looking at you, it's not gonna be me.
There have been discussions, but in all honesty, what needs to happen, Mike, is just like any position. That position's there needs to be a job description that's gonna be written, that job's gotta be posted, and then there needs to be a hiring process that is gonna be followed, because that's the way that it needs to be done.
Okay. My second question is, I've been sitting here for the last 15 minutes trying to think of a less blunt way to ask it, but I can't, and I think you'll probably have a good answer, but I guess I just wanted to know what you had to say to the question, what does the district get out of this? Because it sounds like it's a great program, but I don't know what the district is getting out of it.
And let me respond to that. I think I'm gonna broaden it if it's okay. What the district, and I think the community receives from the work that the coalition's doing is hopefully, and I'm gonna say this with hopefully it not sounding too Pollyannic, is a healthier community. I mean, a healthier community from the standpoint of the youth, a healthier community from the standpoint of parents. And I don't mean to be disparaging and say we're an unhealthy community right now. I hope nobody reads that into what my comments are. But, you know, I think if we're honest and we look at the data that's out there from our Dane County youth surveys, from our parent surveys, there's some issues that need to be addressed, just like there are in any community that needs to be addressed. So that's the best that I could say, Mike, is that if it comes back and the impact of the coalition is such that we have students that are making better decisions, that are healthier, hopefully what that's going to do is have an impact on, you know, the climate, the culture and climate in the schools. Some of the things that you may not have to see, you know, you don't see a huge amount of student things that are coming your way, but occasionally you do. It'd be great. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't see any of those? Now, again, that might be Pollyannic, but, you know, that'd be the goal, I think, as well, is that we're just going to have kids that are, you know, making better decisions, keeping themselves healthy, and a community that's doing the same and supporting, you know, those choices in our youth.
Let me add a couple of things, Brian. I mean, I came from a district prior to being in Waunakee that received a lot of grants like this. The benefit to having it in the school, having it tied there, is it's where a lot of your focus is. Now, your challenge then is making sure it's not a school issue. It's a school, community, parent, everybody's kind of piece, which I think they've done a great job with. When you look at the progress that has been made over the last 5 years, I mean, I remember, Brian, when we had some of the opportunities opening it up, the PAC, and trying to get people to come in and talk about the topic, and there were 2 people that would show up.
You and me.
You and me. And then it came into the point where Jody, I think you were like, we need to do something about this. And so the last opportunity we had, I mean, I think we had, I don't know the numbers.
67, I think.
Yeah, and you had the room set up where you had the hidden, visible type things, and that's huge progress, and the conversations that have been able to move forward, and the different booths and such. I mean, I give Jody a ton of credit for kind of all of her kind of leadership trying to go along with that. This has been a passion of Brian's as he's seen things as from the principal's role, but there's absolutely a great direction to move with this. The dollars that come with the grant like this can just expand some of those opportunities. There's always challenges with the matching piece, but as you look at the in-kind opportunities, it kind of minimizes some of those actual dollars you have to raise. So I think it's really a good benefit. I think you answered it well, Brian. Community-wise, from a school district perspective, I think that this is part of what you need to continue to forward that message without burning out someone like a Jody and other volunteers who are trying to run it right now.
Is this a federal?
Thank you for that.
Is this a federal grant?
Yes.
Yes.
Federal.
I guess I would just say too, from my perspective, it certainly aligns with our stated district goal of increased community engagement. It's another way to meet the people where they're at and to collaborate, to problem solve on an issue in the community that affects all levels. It's not a school problem, but many things manifest themselves in school behavior, so it's just a way of closing that loop and supporting it. So I'm ready to make the motion that we agree to be their fiscal agent as they're requesting.
Seconded.
I would just comment that, I wanna be the fiscal agent, but when the grant goes, if the grant goes away, if we're not successful, then the employee goes back.
Second that.
If that's okay.
Open to the friendly amendment, that's fine by me.
I'd second that.
I
we
think
have to
that
vote on
was
the first,
implied.
or not.
I mean, I think that is what you presented to us, that when the money goes away, the position goes away. So I don't know if we need that amendment to Julie's.
I appreciate the caveat.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to restate it, but I think that is what I heard. Gary?
Nope,
Jeff?
I got a different question,
Okay.
So as an amendment proposal, that would need a second to be added.
It would, yes. So,
So what do you have right now,
I'd
Rebecca?
second your amendment to the original.
I have that Julie made the motion that we become
The fiscal
a
agent.
fiscal agent. Mike seconded it.
Mhm.
Then Jack added the notation that if the money goes away, the employee will no longer be employed by this, and Mike seconded.
okay.
So we vote on the amendment first?
Sure.
I think
Right.
so.
I mean, is that the process?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think we vote on the
Vote on the amendment, then vote on
And then
amendment.
so we have to vote on the amendment to the original, yes. So, the amendment is that we state in our proposal that when the money goes away, if the money goes away.
Because these guys are gonna be successful.
Yeah,
then-
if the
then
money
we're
goes
moving forward.
away, then the
Well,
employee
thank you.
goes away.
I have a different
Discuss,
question.
do we want any discussion on that? If not, I would like to vote on yes.
That's my discussion. How does this fit in with our Dane County thing that we partnered with? Don't we have a Dane County connection that we're working on processes like this?
The building bridges thing?
Yeah.
Oh, the building bridges is certainly different focus, but certainly it pairs in with some of the mental health and other work. So building bridges is really something that works specifically with families. And then it builds the bridge between the family and the school on really a social service type of an approach. So it fits certainly within this,
Yeah.
but it's some of the pieces it's not specifically targeted at kind of AODA type of issues.
Well, I'm just thinking as you're looking for services that help with this stuff when you're doing
Absolutely.
that, I would think that this
Absolutely.
fits in with this.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we're doing that really kind of fit in. When you go back to that big model that Jody shared, that showed
centers,
all
yeah.
the different levels of connections, I think that's absolutely part of what you were doing. I mean, you start to look at, you certainly have the schools, you have those, law enforcement with Joe being back here. I mean, that's a big part of it too. It's not the whole thing.
Joe's
Tying-
just always lurking.
There you go.
We like that.
And you look at kind of the healthcare piece, that fits in also
Yeah.
with some of our social service type networks. So this is
Well,
kind
I'm
of
just
a
looking
wraparound
at
piece.
spending, you could all of a sudden spend resources on something that maybe we have the resources there to use rather than
Yeah,
spend.
I think this is one of the things that complements all of
Uh-huh.
that,
Right.
and that they complement each other.
Okay.
Seems like a really good partnership. Okay, so we need to vote on the amendment first. Any other discussion on that? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? And then we go back to the original motion to be the fiscal agent. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Super.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I know
all.
we exceeded our 35 minutes.
Sorry.
We're shocked.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Okay, consideration of additional paras positions at Prairie.
All right, in your packet, you'll see a memo from Kurt Ely as he makes his way forward. As we're looking at the needs of our students at Prairie Elementary, what we are making a recommendation for tonight are 2 additional paraeducators. You can see the costs associated with the remainder of the year of $24,000 for the total between the 2, and the recommended funds to pay for this, per discussions that took place at the Budget Committee, were with some additional special education categorical aid that we are receiving this year. This is also qualify, I believe, for the transfer of service exemption for next year.
Yes.
So as we take a look at really where we sit, we're looking to add 2 paras at this time of the year, utilizing some existing funds for that, and then apply for the transfer of service.
Really just any questions that you might have about the positions or the request?
This is something that staff really wants.
Yes.
Are we gonna be able to
Absolutely.
find 2 paras at this point? Because I recall the last time we had a discussion, we only had 2 people apply, so.
That's always an unknown until we get out there and look to see what we can get. I know some staff have been talking to some people who are substitute paraeducators within our system who maybe are looking for something more permanent than just substituting. So there's always recruitment that's happening out there. We post and see what we can get as well. I'm hopeful that we can. We just recently did a special education teacher interviews last week where we had, it was probably close to 20 people who had applied for that position, which is pretty good for us. So I'm hoping that maybe we're seeing a turnaround in the pool for all positions.
Any other questions? If not, I would
I
like a motion.
move we support the request.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Kurt.
Correspondence.
Correspondence, a moment of celebration tonight. You'll see in your packet that you have a memo from the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials and their Executive Director, Woody Wiedenhoff, and its announcement that Joe Bellamo has been the 2019 School Facilities Manager of the Year. So congratulations to Joe for that great honor.
Committee reports, starting with budget. Mark, Steve?
Okay, from the minutes you saw that we had a reference to the end of the year balance, which we've talked about in previous meetings, so I won't go through that tonight. One of the positive things from forecast 5 is there's, at this point in time, projected $350,000 plus positive in the budget at the end of the year due to increased revenues and less spending. So keep our fingers crossed we don't have any more snow. Steve presented the 2019-20 second draft of the budget, which the committee approved 3-0. And there's a proposal on the agenda for the MOU from the village regarding the tennis courts, so we'll be talking about those.
So
we have 2
do we
action
need
items.
approval for those 2 items now,
So-
or is that part of the?
No, we need approval of those 2 items this
Right,
evening. So the first one is the consideration of the budget planning process with the FTE numbers also that are articulated that Steve showed on this presentation earlier.
I move approval of that with the increased FTE of 5.90 as requested.
Second.
And all the things that are listed, and the, assistant principal and so on.
So, we have a motion. Did someone second that? Jeff did. Any discussion on the second draft of the budget? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. And then we have the tennis courts.
Steve, you want to give a quick summary of that?
Sure, thanks, Mark. So the Village of Waunakee staff first came to the facility committee meeting late in the fall to talk about Rip Park and the current condition of Rip Park and the goal to have a Rip Park tennis court project take place in 2019. After that meeting, Randy and I worked with the Village of Waunakee staff to come back and present a memorandum of understanding to the facility committee meeting a few months later. At that meeting, there was a request from one of the facility committee members to make a modification to the agreement. That request was for the Village of Waunakee to allow the school district to repay back over a 5-year period of time our share of the cost of Rip Park Tennis Court instead of a 3-year period of time. After conversation with the village staff, they did amend the memorandum of understanding that was brought forward to the last budget committee meeting. There was a motion from the budget committee meeting that I did put in your board book notes so you can see how the budget committee voted on that and brought that to move forward. Basically, the budget committee identified the 5-year repayment with a goal of paying back sooner than that if funds would become available. The memorandum of understanding really outlines the project. There was information in there as well as the bids. The bottom line was the village has about $440,000 budgeted for that project in 2019. The district would contribute a maximum of $285,000 towards that project. We have the ability to pay that back over 5 years. Another important part of the memorandum of understanding is that is a maximum contribution from the district. So for any reason during the project there are change orders or the costs exceed the $725, the district's costs are locked in to not exceed the $285,000. I'll be working with the budget committee to determine the refund, the paying back, the reimbursement to the village. If funds are available, we're going to try to make an additional payment, try to pay it sooner than 5 years. But you see the motion basically says that that was recommended by the budget committee forwarded tonight for your consideration.
The other piece that the budget committee wanted us to take a look at was to also follow up with the village on our other use agreements and use of facilities and sharing of facilities as part of that motion.
I am curious, and I'm sorry because I should have asked the question earlier. Aside from the two co-curricular tennis teams, the boys and the girls, which I understand those programs are growing, correct?
Yes, very much.
Do we use those facilities as well for any of the current PE classes?
Yes.
We do? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so they're for the boys and girls tennis and as well as Phi-Ed classes.
So we are looking for a motion to approve what the budget committee has.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I guess my only question, maybe I'm missing it in here, where exactly in the memorandum of understanding is it the maximum amount? Because it looks more like the village has a dollar amount and then that's subtracted from an estimate amount and we have the number of TBD or X for the amount.
Yeah, so the agreement, do we copy it? Would you mind bringing that up, Rebecca? I can find that for you.
Hopefully it's gonna be less, actually.
If you wanna go to the second page. So that, yep, right there, perfect. So that bullet point, this is understood as a cost not to exceed contribution. So the $285,000 is a cost to not exceed. The examples that were provided were just to show what some scenarios might look like. So as an example, if the final cost of the project was $675, there's an example showing what that would look like. But at the 725,000, which was the figure that the village was looking at for the total budget, the village would pay 440,000. The district's contribution would be 285,000. The village is understanding that cost, the 285,000, if it costs 725,000, is a do not exceed contribution by the district. But as what Gary just mentioned, if the cost is lower, our share would be lower.
But it doesn't say anywhere in here that 285,000 is the max amount. Because then my next question is, if this is a memorandum of understanding, who drafted it? Because it didn't even say that.
Yeah, the village drafted this and shared it with us. If that is not clear, because again, we've had conversations through 3 committees, we will absolutely make that clear, Mike, to make sure that that number is articulated. Because it is understood by both parties to be 285,000.
I think this is just basically from Todd, isn't it?
Yeah.
The contract.
So do we need to make a friendly amendment that we clarify that the district's portion is not to exceed 285?
That
If
would be
so,
fine.
I would recommend that
That's fine.
amendment.
Second.
So we need to vote on the amendment first. We already know how to do this. We're getting good at this amendment stuff. Okay, so we need to vote on the amendment not to exceed 285,000.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we go back to the proposal to pay this amount. Any other discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Just as discussion, that was part of the reason.
I'm a nay, just for the record.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
We were looking at this, and it's kind of willy-nilly on how much of a percentage the school is really, that, do we use this, or what are we
That's what I was
responsible
trying to
for?
get
It's kind
to.
of they came up with a number because they budgeted, and they said, would you cover the rest of this? And then we're saying we do classes and we do the other. So part of what we were looking at that committee and talking about was, well, how do we handle a whole bunch of our other stuff, that our facilities get used by them,
Yeah.
and then we don't end up paying it, they don't pay anything for the use of our facilities. So if you're gonna charge for one way, do you do that the other way? So that's what Randy's talking about, and investigating a little bit our overall use and how we interact with the village on certain things, and what do we get and what do they get, and how does that all work? Because if you're gonna continue to get involved always, and we're responsible for some stuff, which we are, we have programs there that we use that, I get that, but what's your percentage and what's your commitment? So we're just gonna look a little farther into.
That's great. I think we should.
Very good. So you have what you need, Rebecca?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to curriculum committee.
Yes, we actually met twice since we last met as a full board. The minutes from those meetings are in your packets. Amongst the updates, there is one issue we're asking for a vote of approval on is consideration of 8th grade's last day of school. And previously, we had floated as a pilot and a trial balloon. 7th grade meets by themselves the first day of school. So this is the second half of it. Marcy is proposing that 8th grade, which normally is the day we use for their recognition and transition ceremonies, that be allowed to be 8th grade students only. There was a lot of information. She polled parents. There seems to be great support of it, and it came to the committee recommending that we also support allowing 8th grade only on the last day of school. And we're looking for a motion by the full board to approve that.
One of her criteria Marcy shared with us is it would allow staff to be part of the celebration of the movement of that 8th grade. They currently have to stay at the school with the 7th grade, the 8th grade go to the high school for that ceremony. And I think it makes sense that you celebrate as a staff with those students. So again, the committee, after reviewing and talking with Marcy, and it really had come up last spring initially, and now she's coming back to us for approval. And yes, we as a committee did approve that.
And that would begin this year,
Yes.
effective this spring.
Yes, she would like to do that for last day. Mark?
Okay, looking at the parental comments and the unanimous recommendation of the committee, I move we support this proposal.
Second.
Any other discussion?
We did check, there's no issues of hours this year.
You're okay.
That was my question.
You're fine.
So we're good.
You're fine in that area.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Goals Committee.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one other thing. The final version of the digital learning plan, we had an excellent presentation by Herb and some of his staff on updates to how they're progressing with all that rollout. It really was an excellent presentation. I know that's included in the board packet, but we were also interested in getting some information from the board in terms of how you would like that topic brought back to you in the future. It was a lot of work and a really good report, and it doesn't feel right that it just stayed in committee, so.
One of the things we could do is we could bring it back as one of our reports at like next month at a board meeting, if you like.
We're asking for feedback from the group.
I think your other option is you do it during like a curriculum report. We've already done our curriculum reports for this semester, so it would push to fall. I think I would rather try to find a way to do it this spring while it's fresh. So if we want to bring it to the full board.
Well, I think we can bring this to the full board, but I think going forward, this type of stuff goes into curriculum presentation.
Absolutely.
Special meeting.
Absolutely.
And I think what we should be doing as a board is kind of providing you some input on what you want to see at the curriculum presentations.
Thanks. Mark?
Just a request to the curriculum committee. In the past, as new budget items have been presented through the curriculum, a thing that was requested is that when those numbers come forward, that they be listed with comparison to the previous year. I know this is only a target, so it doesn't really matter that much at this point, but as those budgeted items do come forward, it'd be really helpful for me as a board member to see just the one column, total costs for the previous year compared to total costs for the current year. So we can just see what changes is there. Would be helpful information.
So I presume you're talking about our preliminary reviews of the curriculum writing phases and the textbook phases?
When the final numbers come up for approval, so whether it's the curriculum writing or the textbook request, for both of those ends would be a nice piece of information to have.
I will request that we add that in. I will also say, though, that in terms of the curriculum writing portion, work has been done so that that is allocated better in terms of by building per student to better align with how Steve has introduced that's how we're trying to do more and more things. But well noted, and I'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else from curriculum? Okay, moving on to goals. We met once.
Yeah, I can just, one of our conversation was really about community engagement. I think we discussed a number of different topics as far as options for how we can further embark on that work. The committee discussed some ideas that they want to kind of forward to our April board self-evaluation meeting for further discussion.
Next committee is our HR.
Connie's not here, I can do this one if you want.
Yeah, I think we just have one thing.
Yeah, we have one item from the HR committee that we're looking for action on. This is a change to our employment guidelines. It's an area that we've had some conversations about with our K-6 teachers with regards to times that they substitute during their work day in other teachers' classrooms. So in order to bring this up to similarities of our 7-12 teachers, we have added language in there that grade 6 K-6 teachers may substitute during a non-supervisory and non-teaching times for up to 2 hours per day. 2 hours per day makes it congruent with really the amount of time that someone would be able to do it at the 7-12 level. So I think this is a very good move forward, and it would certainly help for our staff at the elementary who are helping out their colleagues in particularly short sub days.
And would that start immediately?
Yep. Upon your
So,
approval.
Upon our approval for the rest of this year.
Is this just, that they can do that, or is this a pay thing that?
It's a pay thing.
Yeah.
Right now, what you have is 7-12 can get paid for it and elementary can't. So this is just to kind of bringing those into congruence together. It's a piece you've heard about at listening sessions for a number of years, and it's just a matter of us spending some time with staff talking about how we could put the language in place that made it consistent. Because elementary and secondary have different language as far as their instructional days. 7-12 is based on per periods. Elementary is based on minutes of instruction. So they're different models. So we felt that this was something that was congruent in a way that, as Connie worked through it, felt that it was certainly fair.
So how does this work in that, I'm just going by what I hear at the listening sessions and as we're going through that, which is a lot of them, I hear complaints about prep time and all that doesn't get used where it is, and then all of a sudden now it's gonna get used somewhere else. Are we gonna hear about this and that? Now they're getting paid there and all of a sudden they're not getting the prep time or their downtime in their day where they do their other work and.
Right, you're not gonna hear about this on a negative sense, Gary. This is a positive thing that's been, I think I've been asked about it for the last 10 years.
Okay, and
So
then
I
they're
think
paid, they're here already and they're in our building, they're paid. How does this adjust?
That would go through they would have to request the payment through the
Right.
building administrator,
It's a
correct? It would have to be approved.
Right, it's an approved piece that you would be putting in through your building principal, and it's when you're being asked to substitute in an area where when we're short on subs, trying to do coverage. That's really what it's meant for.
So then they're paid during that time. If we're paying them already, they're just paid more
They're just
to
paid
a
more.
whatever?
Right.
So it
And
would,
it's adjusted, or is there double
It's at a
paid,
time
or
when they don't have
just-
students, Gary, so that they can go substitute into the classroom.
so it would be like when their students are off at one of the specials. So their kids are at the music teacher or with the art teacher, then they could duck in and cover for.
So right now, let's use a high school example so that it's the easiest one to say. So if Joan's teaching at the high school and she and I were teaching and she had prep that hour and I was gone and I had a class that they needed to cover and they didn't have a teacher for it, she could cover for it and then get paid for that time, which would normally be her time for preparations in the classroom. That's been in place for years at the high school level. We have not had anything similarly at the elementary level. We worked with staff to determine what was a congruent and a fair way to do that, so we identified the 2-hour piece, and that someone who would then do something similar would be able to also get compensated for it. It's partially driven by some equality issues. It's also driven by that as we have shortages of subs, we're looking for creative ways to have coverage. So,
And in terms of, the teacher is getting paid on top of what they're already getting paid, but they're giving up hours, minutes of preparation time that they're gonna have to do outside of the school hour, that they're giving up in class. If Joan has to give up her prep hour for 90 minutes, what she was gonna do for test prep, paper correcting work, that's all gonna go after the work hour, and that's the concept of why paying them at the elementary level happens on the unsupervisory time.
right.
And so it provides them an equal opportunity to both help cover areas where there's no coverage and also compensate them for time that they'll have to put in after the school hours.
This is a piece, Gary, we've had some challenges with trying to get our head around how to do it at the elementary. Because you have this very different language as far as how it's worded, as far as your instructional time, your prep time. Those all mean different things at different levels. So when you look at the elementary and off of the instructional minutes, and we tried to look at something congruent at the high school, we identified the 2 hours piece. And that allows for, really can work with a classroom teacher, or if we had a specialist teacher, like a guidance counselor or someone else who was filling it. So I think we've got, to me, it's a very positive step forward to find a way to really address something that's been a concern for a lot of years.
I move we accept the language.
Thank you.
I second it.
Any other questions, concerns, discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consent agenda. We can take them all. Mark?
I ask that we remove the administrative portion of the language.
Okay.
Vote on that separately.
Okay. Any other pullouts? So then we're looking at a motion for the entire consent agenda except the administrative contracts.
What do you need, a motion? Yes.
I need
So
a
moved.
motion on everything. You fall asleep over there, Gary.
Yeah, I was close.
Second.
So, a first and a second, and this is on everything in the consent agenda except the administrative contracts?
Yeah.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And now we want to vote separately on the administrative contracts.
Move approval of the administrative contract recommendations as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstained.
And one abstain. Any opposed? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Board business?
Don't have any board business. I have a couple pieces that relate to kind of some future items. Dane County Equity Consortium, that's a group that we have been part of since last summer. It's a group of about 19 school districts. One of the things that we are working on is doing a couple series of programs for school board members from the region to do some work just to help have some dialogue, conversation, common understanding around some of the things that consortium is looking at and studying. They're right now looking at some times in the fall, and the pieces of input that I'm asked to really just kind of get a quick poll of you is, one, if you were interested in attending something like this, we're looking at probably 2 different sessions, about 4 hours each. And the thought was you could either do those in an evening or on a Saturday morning, and just trying to get a sense from the different districts if there is a sense of a preference to offer something like that and the level of a draw that would be to you to attend. So if you were to.
What's the goal? What's the objective?
The whole objective is really to have continued dialogue around kind of the work of the Dane County Equity Consortium. So it's looking at student equity and equity work around the whole region. So there's 19 districts that are meeting to kind of see where our common goals are. And this is really a piece to do some professional development with board members. We met with John Ashley from the School Board Association. They have some pieces that are specific more on a state level, but this would be something that would be more on a regional level, probably led by someone like Heidi Gill from the National Equity Project, something like that. It would talk about the region, it would talk about some of the scope of the work that's occurring, and also have some input and discussion between districts as far as kind of what districts are doing and seeing in their areas. So I don't need a commitment of people. It's really more of just, if we were to offer something like this, which they're looking to do, would an evening during the week be a preference, or would like a Saturday morning be a preference? Saturday morning.
I'd be interested in either, is fine with me.
All right, great. That was all. I'll just give that input, and then we'll find a date, and I'll advertise it once it's available. We need to look at our reorg meeting. So we're jumping forward into April. Reorg has to happen anytime after April 22nd. I know that our preference has always been to try to get that accomplished before the May board meeting. So the May board meeting is May 13th. So if we were looking for a reorganizational meeting sometime between April 22nd and May 13th. This is usually a relatively short meeting, usually about half hour.
Oh, May 13th at 5:30.
That's really late. Yeah, I,
It's our board meeting.
yeah, I would prefer we not do that right before the regular meeting.
Trying to be efficient.
I'm around any of those weeks. I prefer we do it earlier rather than later, so.
Yeah, if we do it earlier, we can probably have committees set up
Yes,
by the 13th.
right, that would be good.
Everything, and that would always be cleaner.
So you can meet on the 22nd.
The week
That
of the
would be- that would
22nd
be
or the
your
week of the
earliest.
29th?
Yep. That'd be your preferences.
Just meet on Earth Day.
What day is that?
That's the 22nd.
The 22nd. We can do it on the 22nd.
Works for me, I'll be here.
That's okay for me.
Okay.
5:30.
What time?
I'm not available until 6:30 or later, unless we do it early in the morning, or in the morning.
7:30. 7:30.
That would work.
I have a
6:30 or later, or
Oh,
7:30-ish, I don't care.
we can do 6:30. It's fine.
6:30.
6:30.
6:30.
AM or
April.
PM?
PM, I'm,
On the
April
22nd.
22nd, 6:30.
Don't give me a heart attack.
And we need a motion for that since it's a special meeting.
I would so move we schedule that meeting at 6:30 PM on April 22nd.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay.
Steve, do you need budget
No.
before?
Yeah, yes, I am, but
Hopefully you leave it first.
I have places to go and people to see.
April 1st,
All right, if we're looking at the week of April 1st, we need two meetings. We need a facilities meeting and a budget meeting.
What week is that?
April 1st.
Who's on that committee?
They could be back to back if that works.
Budget and
I'm on both of them.
Calendar, yeah.
I'm good on the first.
Yeah.
Our, there's just two people on that committee.
Mhm.
I don't care which, if they're both going that day, I don't care which is first.
We did, are you looking at the 1st? That April
Yeah.
1st?
You
We
said
did like,
April, the week of April 1st, didn't you?
if we did,
Yep, so
one at
April
5
1st is
and one
good,
at
7:35.
what time? You want to do
7:35.
morning? Is
For
that
a
what you're-
budget,
Budget and facilities.
Okay. At the same time?
It'd be
Or,
back to back probably.
I'm not on facility.
You're in budget.
Carries on both.
who else is on facility? Jack, you on that?
I'm on facility, yes.
So they're both on both.
And the other one on that was Dave, right?
Yeah.
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 So we'd be good if you can do the first. How long's the budget gonna be? If I don't talk,
Probably an
probably.
hour, I'd say an hour for each.
About 15,
Hour for
20
each?
minutes.
Can you stick around a little later on that day? If we go 7:35 and then after?
Yeah, probably I could work it out.
You can do them back to back then, if you want.
April 1st, 7:30.
Mhm. April Fools.
So you need 7:35, Mark, is that what you
Yep,
said?
that would be helpful.
7:30.
7:35 and
7:35.
And then 8,
yeah,
8:30?
8:30 or whatever.
Does that work, Steve?
Which one is
All right.
first, which one's second?
Budget's first.
That's all I
Budget
need.
first? Okay.
Okay. I think we're done. Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.